Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Unnamed Bracketology podcast. My name is Kerry Miller, joined as always by my good friend Graham Dorn. Graham, we've got a lot to get to on what happened on Saturday, a little bit of what happened on Sunday, but I'm thinking for this one, I'm going to give it like 16 to 18 minutes and then just sit out the second half. How would you feel about that?
Let's do it. Just like Garen Peterson, all-star performance.
Exactly.
Put up as much as you can early on. Build up such a lead that the rest of the podcast can't possibly be ruined.
I'm going to be the number one draft pick for my half game of effort. I'm going to throw up this little spreadsheet I put together quickly. I'll say first and foremost, as you can see there, we have an or next to Nebraska and Illinois. We're recording this game like just tipped off 10 seconds ago, but we have lives. We had something to do, and we wanted to get this done anyway. So we're just gonna gloss over that one. I think either way, the winner of that game is the top number two seed, and the loser will still be a two seed. I think probably as a six. Graham, you have Illinois as an eight. Either way, it's close. Big game, but also doesn't really immediately matter for bracketology purposes. One's the top two seed, and one's another two seed. But let's just go right in with the five biggest wins of the day. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see the whole thing there. I first and foremost for me, UCF getting that big win over Texas Tech. Even though it was a home win, we have been saying for weeks that UCF is just this tweener in the Big 12 between these six teams looking good for a top four seed and the rest of the league that's probably not going to make the tournament. But now it feels like UCF is pretty solidly in. We both have UCF as our last number six seed. Neither of us really dropped Texas Tech all that much. On the flip side of that coin, what was your biggest takeaway from that game?
Yeah, I think for me it was two things. For Texas Tech, it's probably going to mean a two seed is too much to get to this year. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but the road is just this is what separates the truly elite teams from the other really, really good teams. The really, really good teams drop these sorts of games, whereas the elite teams find a way to win them. So I think Texas Tech is probably going to end up a 4 or a 5 seed would be my guess. Maybe a 3, but I think a 2 is probably too much to ask. UCF has really no way to miss the tournament without completely blowing it. Now, I wouldn't put it past them that they can't completely blow it, but really, they don't have to do much. They just have to not lose a lot. And if they do that, they're going to make the tournament.
Yeah, they've got 9 games left. Only 2 of them are against that top 6 in the league. I forget which 2 they play, maybe Houston and Iowa State. But that means they have 7 opportunities at not great losses. That's what they need to avoid. But I think if they go 2-7 even, I think they'll be in pretty decent shape. 3-6, they're probably just about a lock. If they go 500, they're absolutely in. I think that was really the defining win for them. And then going right down the list, Kentucky, we both have just barely behind UCF after their road win over Arkansas. Obviously, you all know that there was a coaching motivation there for Kentucky to win that game. It was an emotional game, but also one that they just had to have to solidify their resume. I thought they were kind of teetering between an 8 and a 9 seed before that, and now they're pretty solidly at the top of the 7 line. I actually dropped Arkansas to right behind Kentucky. You still have them a little bit ahead of the Wildcats. What's your biggest takeaway on this game?
Yeah, I think the doubts that Kentucky could possibly miss the NCAA tournament are they're gone, right? Like with the wins they have, St. John's is looking a little bit better. Tennessee's looking better. Arkansas was obviously a very good win. Like when you add those together, Kentucky's making the tournament. My bigger thought was both these teams are probably going to end up in that 5, 6, 7 range. Whereas I thought for a while maybe Arkansas could get pretty high up the bracket. And again, that path seems to be locked down. So that for me was like a big story of the weekend, is that we're finally getting to the point where you're just starting to see a little bit of separation and some more tiers amongst some of the teams. And I think Kentucky and Arkansas are going to fit into that similar tier by the time we get to the end of the season. I still have Arkansas just a little bit above because they still have a winning record against quads 1 and 2, whereas Kentucky still has a losing record there. But if I had to guess who has a better path to a higher seed, I'd actually go Kentucky down the roads, but right now I think it's Arkansas.
So speaking of reaching that point of tiers, I texted you about this morning. I feel like 32 overall is that cut line right now for me, where I'm like, ugh, I don't like any of this. Then you get down to the actual bubble, and it's kind of hideous. So these teams, Kentucky and Arkansas, both in that, wherever they are in the 20s, it does feel like they're just about a lock at this point. I don't know that you'll see anybody actually calling either of them a stone cold lock at this point, just in case they did lose their next 9 or 10 games. But it would be really tough for either of them to fall out at this point. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And I think I've never felt in like close to 30 years of doing this as strongly as I feel this year about the separation between the top of the bracket and the bottom of the bracket. Like, I just don't know how these teams are going to fall out because they already have quality wins. Their efficiency metrics are already terrific. Then you look at the bottom of the bracket, it's like, not only do their efficiency metrics say they're mediocre teams, they're not winning either. Like, how are these? It would take a miracle for these teams to pass the teams at the top of the bracket. So I really feel pretty strongly that we have more locks than ever right now. And teams like Kentucky and Arkansas, maybe without fantastic resumes, are really solidly in because there's just not going to be anybody passing them from behind.
Number three on my list of biggest wins. I mean, it was the game of the day. Kansas winning at home against BYU. We already kind of joked about it. Darren Peterson was awesome in the first half. Then he didn't play the second half. What happened to Marco Jackson? He was out too. I was at a Mexican restaurant eating a burrito. I wasn't able to catch any of the audio at that point.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not sure exactly what happened to him. It wasn't until later I was like, man, itself is not doing any rotation. Like, I know Peterson's not coming in, but like, man, these guys are gassed. Put somebody, and then it was like, oh, okay, that explains why Marco has not rotated back into the game. So, not entirely sure what happened to him. I think long term, hopefully, won't be too big of a deal for the team, but big victory for Kansas to add another Q1A win, even if it is kind of at the bottom tier of what would qualify as a Q1A win. For BYU, not concerning individually, but it starts to add up. Now they've had their opportunity against Arizona. They had their opportunity against Kansas. Like, once you get one of these big games, you got to win one. And right now they just haven't done that. So I think BYU at this point, top of my 5 line, and I feel pretty comfortable with it because they just need that one big win to make everything else seem a little bit better.
Yeah, we're in lockstep there with BYU at 17 overall. I think we've reached the point where we've seen enough of them against elite teams. We've seen them dig themselves so many big holes. They've had enough opportunities to prove that they are a top 4 seed, and they haven't capitalized on any of them. So they'll still have chances to do it. I'm not looking at their schedule, but I'm sure they have at least 4 more games left of that caliber where they can prove that they deserve to be in the protected seed range. But until you get a quality win, I mean, we've got I have Virginia, I think, at 15 overall, and they're 4-0 in Quad 1A, whereas BYU is 0-4. Simple as that. I can't justify putting the Cougars ahead of the Cavaliers at this point. Fourth on the big wins for me, Texas winning at Oklahoma, and again, I don't think it was a great win, but it was an important win. Keeps Texas narrowly in my field. You still have Texas out. Are they close for you? Where are you at with the Longhorns now?
Texas is my first team out of the field. So I think they are
Oh,
really close.
okay. We'll
They
change that.
they have what I consider to be one of those, prototypical bubble resumes where you have a lot of really good things at the top, but you also have what bubble teams do, which is lose too many games to teams they shouldn't be losing to. That's what makes you a bubble team. I think Texas is really close, not just now, but into the future. And I do think Texas is probably a little bit more likely than not to actually make the field because some of the teams I have in front of them, Cal, Virginia Tech, George Mason, I just think they're better than them. So eventually, I think Texas probably will move in. For me, I just want to see a little bit more before I actually put them right back into the bracket.
So Texas is now 13-9 overall. One of those wins was against Chaminade. So as far as the selection committee is concerned, they're still 12-9 because that's a non D1 result. um, where did they go on my sheet here? 2-5 quad 1A, three quad 1 wins. They do have that kind of ugly 0-1 record against quad 3. We talked about that I guess 2 days ago with the SEC that Texas was 4-9 against the top three quads, and I said, yeah, they probably need to win these next five just to get to 9-9. Even though none of those wins will be particularly valuable. I mean, this that win at Oklahoma might be the best of the bunch. Maybe they play at Missouri as well. That would also be a borderline quad one, but they just need to stack up wins because they've already got those wins over Alabama and Vanderbilt. They also beat NC State in Maui, correct? Yeah. So they've got several wins over the field. They just need to stop having so many losses. And as ugly as the bubble is, I'm able to keep them in. You just barely have them out. I mean, it's however you feel like plugging your nose at that point in the exercise. And then we already touched on Nebraska and Illinois. So let's move on to the bubble bonanzas. Top of the list, Indiana goes on the road, almost blows what was a 10-point lead with like 75 seconds left. Well, they did blow it. Went to two overtimes in the end, but they were able to get that road win over UCLA. All of a sudden, God, you have Indiana up to a 9 seed. What the heck happened here?
Yeah, I don't like it, but I think for Indiana, it's this simple. You look at, you were talking about like 32 is where your line is. When I got to 36, that's where I was just like, oh man, there's no one else. Like there's no other tournament worthy profile here. So I'm just going to go with the one who I think is the best combination of good efficiency and two really good wins. And I do think at UCLA qualifies as a really good win. Obviously, beating Purdue qualifies as a really good win. I think when you see a team like that, they're very similar to NC State in that way, where it's like, okay, your efficiency tells us you're really good. You have the players that make us think you're really good, and coaching, I would argue, as well. And then you add that with a couple of really nice wins. It kind of all comes together. So I see Indiana now as a team that, despite not having a very strong profile, does kind of stand out once you get down to these teams because they're just better than the other teams they're competing with.
Yeah, I've been saying for a few days like how weak the bubble is and just like who's going to get those wins and you get a couple quality wins and you can really vault yourself into the field, but I do feel like this was a very unique situation for Indiana. Like most teams, if you win a home game against, a 3 seed like Purdue, you win a road game against a 10 or 11 seed like UCLA, you're not going to suddenly go from like 10 spots out to 10 spots in. But Indiana already had great predictive metrics. They didn't have anything close to a terrible loss. They were just lacking in those wins. I don't think there are any other teams out there in that boat where they can all of a sudden in the span of 2 games, unless it's like, beating Michigan State and Illinois back to back or something like that. That'd be a little bit different. But to get a bubble win and then a solid home win, like that's not going to change many teams' profiles like it could with Indiana. I mean, I was also considering them as high as 36. I just couldn't quite justify it. Something about putting Indiana ahead of Miami, Ohio, just rubbed me the wrong way. Even though I've been very outspoken about the fact that I don't think the Red Hawks are a legitimate at-large candidate. But whatever. Those 9s and 10 seeds are pretty hideous. Speaking of, the other one, Wisconsin wins at home against Ohio State. For both of us, that keeps the Buckeyes out of the field. Had they won that, I'm 99% sure I would have ended up with Ohio State in probably right around where Indiana is right now. So we have Wisconsin now at 33 and 35 respectively. So both of us have them as a 9 seed and Ohio State slightly out. Any thoughts on that particular Big Ten result?
I think it was a really important bubble game. I think UCLA, Indiana was an important bubble game, but I think this was kind of a more important true bubble. And what I mean by that is I think UCLA and Indiana might both eventually get in. I think probably only one of Wisconsin or Ohio State was getting in. And this might be what tips it towards Wisconsin's way as opposed to Ohio State's way.
In Ohio State's interest, they still play, they host Michigan this Sunday. They played that weird neutral game against Virginia on Valentine's Day. They are still at Michigan State, at Iowa versus Purdue, and a possible massive season-ending bubble game at home against Indiana. So the chances are still there. Ohio State's probably going to stay smack dab on the bubble like they have been for 6 consecutive weeks. They'll probably beat Maryland on Thursday, probably lose to Michigan on Sunday, and we'll be right back here talking about them as one of the first five teams out. What's next on the list here? Oh, the Mountain West game. San Diego State was leading by like 10 with 10 minutes left. I went and helped my daughter put together a bag of Legos. I came back and Utah State was winning. I don't even know what the heck happened, but the Aggies got that quality win. They move up a little bit more comfortably into the projected field while San Diego State drops out for me. I think you already had them out, but they were technically my projected auto bid from the Mountain West, but now they are tied, so I no longer have to have them in. But they're still close. Maybe instead of the game itself, we can touch on the general state of the Mountain West. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the Mountain West is probably looking at two bids, would be my guess. But I think it's more likely that they would have one and maybe a surprise tournament champion than they would get three. I just don't think the committee's going to have the appetite for three. I think you look at San Diego State. This was really the sort of win that they needed to stamp their resume. I think New Mexico has a very similar resume, just a little bit stronger overall. What it does do for Utah State is now I think the Mountain West can pretty solidly feel like they're going to get Utah State. So anybody that they get besides Utah State is really going to be a positive.
Yeah, I think I see there. We both have Utah State at 34. I think I have New Mexico at like 41. Well, no, I have Indiana 41. Somewhere in that range, 40 maybe. Um, San Diego State is my third team out. Nevada is kind of creeping onto the board too. So that top four is getting interesting. I think that definitely helps the chances of it being a multi-bid league, but I do think the chance of it being a three-bid league definitely took a hit this weekend. Another fourth biggest bubble bonanza was Cal winning at Miami. That was probably could have put that one at number one because it made Cal very interesting as an at-large team. You got them in, I have them just barely out, and we both dropped Miami, who also lost at home to Florida State like 10 days ago. I think Miami has gotten really ugly in a hurry, and if we were looking at Miami's resume with fresh eyes, we probably wouldn't have them in. But because they've been in for so long, I think we're reluctant to drop them out. But they don't have a win over a Ken Palm top 60 team. They now have two ugly home losses to teams that, probably not going to make the tournament. No offense, Cal. We've been saying for a while we don't know if they have the staying power. But yeah, what do you think? You now have Cal one spot ahead of Miami.
Yeah. Who do I think has a better chance to make it at the end of the year? I still think it's Miami. But right now, it's actually a very interesting bubble to me because you have Virginia Tech, who beat both George Mason and Cal, but those were in Blacksburg. And then you have Cal, who beat UCLA on a neutral court, and they won at Miami. That really speaks to me. Like, if you're looking for wins over the field, now you can be on UNC and Miami and UCLA. And, like, it does get really interesting in the bubble of how many of those teams have played each other. Will the committee favor the head-to-head results? Will they say, well, it depends on location? I could see them going a lot of different ways, but it would be interesting to see if that same bubble solidifies, because if it does, head-to-head could become really, really important.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to if I had put Cal in the field, like trying to figure out first four matchups based on, they're in the same conference and so many of them have played each other during the regular season. It would have been crazy to get it to work out. But fifth one there, Texas A&M wins. That was at Georgia, right? It came out that was like 25-2. Georgia made things a little bit interesting the rest of the way, but never got all the way back in. I think Texas A&M is now pretty convincingly in the field. I mean, not just comfortably in for now, but hard to see them falling out unless they were to just, they did nothing in non-conference play. I had that tweet yesterday. I don't speaks volumes to what it's like to put anything out on social media that all the Texas A&M fans were like yelling at me like, well, what do you fucking expect? I was like, I didn't even say they're bad. I don't think they're fraudulent. I just think it's crazy that this team is now leading the SEC. But I think this was more of a problematic one for Georgia than necessarily a bolstering one for Texas A&M. We both now have Georgia down as a 10 seed. What are your thoughts on the Dogs moving forward?
I think that they were. I think I may have moved them up to don't blow it in my tournament chances graphic the other day,
They're
uh,
trying to.
and they lost three in a row. So like, there's a reason I call don't blow it because you can still blow it, and if you blow it, like you're out. Like it's not a guarantee by any means. And they are now in my maybe category. So that shows how bad those three consecutive losses are, especially the Texas A&M loss. You can write off some of the other ones, like okay, that's a challenging game. You don't lose like that to Texas A&M at home if you're a tournament team. Really costly loss. I still think they're in for now based on their overall quad one and quad two records. But man, they got some work ahead of them because it is a tough call now on whether they're going to make the field or not.
Yeah, I couldn't even come close to actually dropping them all the way out, but they're definitely much more on the bubble than they were a week ago. So they have two wins at home over Auburn and Arkansas, a road win over Missouri. They didn't really do much of anything in the non-conference. Yeah, they've got their work cut out from them. They still play Florida. They play at Vanderbilt. They play at Kentucky. They host Alabama. So yeah, opportunities are there, but work to be done. And then what was the? Oh, that was the fifth game on the list. And then five brutal losses. The first four, I think, are teams that are at this point not even remotely in the conversation because of those losses. Stanford losing at Florida State. You were already all over the Cardinal not being in the conversation anymore since losing Chisholm Akpara. This is their fourth consecutive loss. They did the thing where, right, their first game without him, they beat North Carolina, and then they come down and fall apart. And I don't know if there's even a path for them anymore. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like theoretically, it's there because they've built such strong wins, but realistically, they would have to build equally strong wins from here on out. Otherwise, the committee's just going to give them the West Virginia treatment and say,
Yep.
"Yeah, you did that without that guy." So we're just dismissing them entirely.
Yep. Butler got destroyed by Georgetown in the Battle of the Dogs. I think they're done. I mean, they lost by like 22 to St. John's earlier in the week. Then they got crushed by Georgetown, which is not a good loss at all. And I think they've already played four of their six games against the top three in the league. So they would pretty much need to win out to get back in. And I don't see this team doing that. West Virginia and TCU both lost. TCU got just destroyed by Colorado as we were getting ready to start this call. West Virginia lost. I think that was at home to Baylor yesterday. That was the more damaging one to me because it directly bumps Baylor back ahead of West Virginia. And I mean, Baylor's not really in the conversation, but they're more so in it than the Mountaineers are now.
Yeah, so the Big 12's got a major problem. TCU swept Baylor, so TCU should easily be above Baylor. Is the thought? Baylor just went to West Virginia and beat them in Morgantown, so Baylor should be above West Virginia. West Virginia is actually doing fairly well in the Big 12. They still have a winning record in the Big 12, but West Virginia is not selectable. So instead of bumping any of those one teams up, it just pulls them all down. I don't see the Big 12 landing an eighth bid this year. I just think we're looking at the Big Six and UCF, and that's it. And I think it's really good news if you're a Big 10 bubble team or you're an SEC bubble team, because you're looking over here at the Big East and be like, yeah, Creighton's completely out of the picture now after getting destroyed by UConn. Butler just completely tanked their chances by losing at home to Georgetown. Seton Hall is my biggest competitor from the Big East. I don't even think there's anyone I'm competing with in the Big 12. Like, the bids are there to be taken. Also, terrific news if you're a George Mason, for example, maybe in Miami, Ohio, maybe you can take a loss and still make the tournament. Good news for the teams who are looking at these leagues and thinking there's no bubble teams left to take my bid.
Yeah. If ever there was a year for a team to go 32-2 with nary a quality win and still sneak in, it's this year. The opportunities are there. It's going to be a three bid Big East. Like you said, it's almost certainly going to be a seven bid Big 12. I don't see the ACC getting more than eight. Uh, the SEC is probably still going to produce like 10, but they're not going to get 14 like last year. So yeah, we got to get those bids somewhere. And our last one here on the brutal losses, St. Mary's doesn't particularly want a spot in the field either. I think the Gales situation is one we've seen many times over the years. We were tweeting about that a little bit last night, and we were talking about it on Wednesday with our mid-major pod. It's starting to feel like St. Mary's needs a win over Gonzaga in order to be worthy of an at-large bid, and they've now missed on one of those, minimum two, possibly three opportunities. We both still have St. Mary's in as a 10 seed, but the opportunities for quality wins aren't really there. They still have a home game against Santa Clara, who is, I think, 43 in the net. In theory, they will run into Santa Clara in the WCC semifinals. If the Nets hold as what they are now, that would be a quad one win, but it also probably knocks Santa Clara out of the conversation for a bid. So, will they even have a win over a tournament team if they don't beat Gonzaga? I don't. It hinges on Virginia Tech at that point. So, what do you think is if you had to put odds on St. Mary's getting in? Where would you set that line?
I probably say about 60%. And the reason why I think they're likely to get in is they still get to play Gonzaga at home. So they've got a shot there. And
Yeah,
besides that, the other thing that I think could work to their advantage is not just whether Santa Clara ends up being like a quad one win. Santa Clara could actually beat Gonzaga themselves. And if they do that, Santa Clara looks like a tournament team suddenly. And all they have to do, maybe they don't have to beat Gonzaga. Maybe they just have to beat Santa Clara and show, yeah, we got a quad one win over a tournament team. It's Santa Clara. And maybe that will work. If Santa Clara doesn't beat Gonzaga and St. Mary's doesn't beat Gonzaga, I think it's a lot more problematic because then you could potentially just be looking at a one bid league because even if Santa Clara and St. Mary's beat each other, it could just be like, well, yeah, you just eliminated that team from tournament contention, so you clearly don't have a win over a tournament team. So very interesting conundrum for St. Mary's. Like typically you want to cheer against the teams that you're competing with around the bubble and also the ones you're competing with in the conference standings. But in St. Mary's particular case, I think it might be better for them if Santa Clara really puts together a nice profile, including a win against Gonzaga.
yeah. They also want Virginia Tech to finish strong, so that neutral win becomes a quad one again. You could probably piece together most of this from just this graphic, but what is your current last four in and first four out? I got to pull my own up.
Oh, yeah, I got to remember off the top of my head. So I guess the last four in then would be Cal, Miami, George Mason, and UCLA were the last four
Oh
in.
yeah.
The first four out were Texas, Oklahoma State, Seton Hall, and Santa Clara. And then Missouri's right behind them at fifth out.
Well, we got to talk about George Mason real quick. I forgot that you have them in, and I'm all for it. I have them just barely out. But how did you end up getting the Patriots into your field aside from just the bubble sucks?
Yeah, the bubble sucks, is how George Mason ended up getting in my field. But I mean, you look at it and you still say, okay, really strong overall record, of course, but also a pretty nice Q1, Q2 record. And if you're going to take anybody that doesn't have that big, strong win, take the team that just wins a lot of games and hasn't had the opportunities. Don't put in the team that's had a ton of opportunities and hasn't delivered.
Yeah. My last four in Texas, UCLA, Miami, Florida, and Missouri. First four out: Santa Clara, Cal, San Diego State, and George Mason, or Ohio State, and then George Mason. So that's my first five out. And I'm with you. Like, I mean, if UCLA had plenty of opportunities to prove they belong, Missouri's going to have plenty of opportunities. Like, I'd rather see a Santa Clara or a George Mason get in, but it doesn't matter what I would prefer. We're predicting what the committee's going to do, and the committee always seems to side with those 8 and 10 major conference teams who had 15 opportunities to win and got three of them, as opposed to one of these teams who had two chances and couldn't quite knock it out of the park. But that's just the way it goes. That'll wrap us up for today. We got to go watch the rest of Nebraska, Illinois. Until next time, take care and enjoy the hoops.